Now, for a closer look at Zimbabwe's economic crisis and what a post-Mugabe economy might look like, I'm joined by Emira Woods, independent analyst and consultant and an associate fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you.
So what would you say are the most significant changes that Zimbabwe's economy has undergone under Mugabe?
Well, I think the changes have been many. I think first there's been attention to those building blocks of society, education and healthcare. The early parts of the Mugabe era had tremendous amounts of spending in those key areas. And I think you can see the benefits of that today in terms of the literacy rate in Zimbabwe, in terms of the, all the issues around addressing HIV/AIDS and the rest, right? So attention to those kind of core issues early on has paid off. And I think the issue is that, there was this whole question around land reform. And you had particularly, the UK making promises at the end of the white rule in Rhodesia, right? Making promises that were never kept. So you had actual revenue that was denied from Zimbabwe that could have put them on a firmer economic path post-independence. And unfortunately, because the West did not have its way under Mugabe, quite frankly, they reneged on those promises. And so the economy early on had some very serious hits around land reform and revenue for land reform that just was not forthcoming. And so I think you still have some changes to be made, especially in this area of land reform, but as well in the area of creating an economy that works for all, not just for a small elite, but for all in the country, particularly young people who are without jobs and who are highly educated and clamoring for an economy that works for them.
And to that point, then, what would you say are the most pressing economic priorities for the country right now?
Zimbabwe is incredibly rich, well endowed with resources, from platinum to gold. The list is quite long. You also have quite a tourist trade coming in with Victoria Falls, one of the natural wonders of the world, right? So you have the building blocks of a stable and healthy economy. But unfortunately, it has not been, an environment that has been conducive for manufacturing, for example, or processing of particularly those natural resources. And I think we've got to have a country that, pays attention to particularly the labor-intensive, the higher income-bringing skills around manufacturing to be able to get on a firmer footing for the future. I think we also see a Zimbabwe that's vitally rich in technology. Young people are on social media throughout, particularly all this political change. It's ignited the technological space in Zim. And I think there's a need to have an economy that actually recognizes all those skills within and creates a conducive environment to have those skills actually work for the benefit of all in the economy.
Let's also look at monetary policy. How has that changed over the years? Especially we saw that Zimbabwe was forced to abandon its own currency back in 2009 due to hyperinflation. What needs to happen and what's changed so far?
Well, to some extent, Zimbabwe has been sort of isolated from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Some say that's a good thing because they've been able to go their own way. I think there will be tremendous pressures now from the international financial institutions to have Zimbabwe kind of fall in step with, again, programs that have pushed deregulation, privatization. Some of these programs will be quite controversial in Zimbabwe. And I think what will come will be a real deliberation on the economy that's needed for this new era. And it may be an economy that has a role to play for governments and government regulating, particularly capital controls, right? You have a World Bank and IMF saying, get rid of capital controls. And we see now you have businesses in Zim over the past week that have taken their money to offshore havens and the rest, right? We've seen the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, all of these kind of evidence of illicit financial flows. And these international financial institutions have still said no to capital controls. But Zim may be in this new era really well-placed to say, we need a government that regulates this economy. We need a government that has capital controls so that the benefits of the economy actually get distributed to all.
Now, let's also take a longer view there in terms of where Zimbabwe goes from here. We know that in terms of investment. They would like to see more. Where does the country go from here economically?
I think manufacturing will be a key part of it. And I think we see there are many interests that are at play, both Western interests and other interests from within the region. Those investors that are Zimbabwean and have been long wanting to be a part of an economy for the future. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity now to go back and reinvest in the country. So domestic resource mobilization has to be a part of the answer. I think you also will have to have some real discussions as to the geopolitical actors and the role that they play. If it's the U.S. that's at last lifting sanctions, what does that mean for Zimbabwe and Zimbabweans and the economy? And if it's now China, which has played an active role, continuing to play an active role in this new era, I mean, there are lots of questions to be asked, and I think we're all attentively waiting to see how the Zimbabweans will answer them.
Indeed, we'll have to see how everything unfolds. Thank you, as always. Emira Woods, independent analyst and consultant and associate fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you.
Pleasure.